not exactly hidden. Throughout the day, the world seems strangely calm. The birds are singing, and there is a lovely scent in the air. All throughout the provinces, baronies and duchies to the east of the dark forest, there is a bloom. Life seems to utterly flourish as every plant and beast seems to be singing in joy, a great movement and energy and eagerness. Few notice the shadows these suddenly unfurled leaves cast. Less feel suspicion, and none notice the figures that shift through. However, there are results regardless. By dusk, answers are found and everything is put together. When it's shown to Cal's Tarn, he walks into a room physically filled with information. Rolls of parchment and stacks of paper are all over, as well as multiple recording devices just ready to spill forth the collected secrets. Well, I can certainly say they're a thorough group, aren't they? Morg Arkun notes as he leads Cal's Tarn in. He picks up a scroll and reads through the schedule of Duchess Mazur Twen. Her entire day is laid out in front of him in obsessive detail, watched from every angle by Dale. Apparently the man is just a few steps away from being a very distressing stalker. Why is there so much? You need to be certain, absolutely certain. We figured out who it is, and when you ask for them, they will be brought to you, bound hand and foot in roots and vines, yours to do whatever you want with, Koga says as he walks in behind them. Why not tell me now? It's important for you to learn this. Don't worry, your enemy won't get away. There was more than a few fast ones pulled though, Koga admits, and Morg Arkun gives him an odd look. Go through all of this. It's a good thing to learn either way, Morg Arkun says before walking up to Koga. Can we speak outside, please? Certainly, Koga replies, and they both step outside as Cal's Tarn starts listening to an audio report and recording. They take a few steps away from the building and Morg Arkun puts an arm around Koga's shoulders, at first with a smile, then drawing him in with a furious snarl. What are you trying to pull? No more nonsense, alien. What are you after? He demands and raises an eyebrow at Koga's response. San, Ni, Ichi, Ren. Koga counts down before breaking Morg's grip and flipping him over his back in a blur of movement to slam the man into the ground. A boot finds itself on the man's chest and Koga glares down at him. We may both be blooded killers, but between the two of us, I am the one who has been actively training their entire life. Now, you are going to speak to me like the rational adult you allegedly are, or I'm going to ignore you. If you lay a hand on my like that again, I will break the arm you used to do so. Koga snarls down on him in Cinder Tongue. Morg Arkun's eyes widen, and he takes a few calming breaths. Okay, I will be calm. Morg Arkun replies, and Koga nods and moves his boot before offering his hand to help him up. He takes it and is on his feet in just a few more heartbeats. He brushes the dirt and debris off his jacket and pants as he tries to work on what to properly say. Now, what's your problem? Koga asks, once again speaking in galactic trade. This isn't a game. Cal's Tarn is on a knife's edge between madness and salvation. If this were a normal situation, he would be in the forest, too busy staying alive and growing stronger to focus on his rage. It's only when he gained the ability to thrive in the forest would his mind turn further to vengeance. But you're in the way of that, and you're afraid things might get worse, Koga says. Getting in his way for him to focus so much on his rage is bad enough. Feeding the object of his wrath to him as a child, Morg Arkun demands. What would you rather be done? What do you think will happen if we weren't looking for his malefactor? Or worse yet, what happens when he figures out who's responsible and we tell him to wait? He would hate you. He would also sneak around to get it done himself. Exactly. More than anything, he needs closure and justice. He needs to know who did this and why. He also needs to make it right himself, Koga says. I know that, but he's a child. Even the youngest sorcerers to emerge to bloody their hands were at least 15 years old. Cal's Tarn is barely 13. Morg Arkoon protests and Koga nods.
I know. It's wrong. But this won't get better by sheltering him. What happens next is going to happen no matter what, and trying to stop it will just cause more harm. The best thing we can do is help him out the other side, Koga says, and Morg Arkan just stares at him for a few moments. You have something more to say, don't you? Koga asks, and Morg Arkan looks away. Just say it. Morg Arkan looks Koga right in the face and he frowns. You don't deserve to be sorcerers. Koga raises his eyebrows in surprise at that. Do you care to explain, or will you just be leaving it there? Sorcerers, I suffered for my power. I cast myself into the darkness, not knowing if I was worthy, and spent years where every night I didn't fall asleep so much as collapse in exhaustion. I pushed and learned and grew through adversity and pain. You just showed up. What makes you think you're worthy of this? What makes you think that this power, that this shelter and protection is something you deserve? It's not up to me. But if it was, you wouldn't hear the woods. This village wouldn't be here. You would be lost and maybe stumbling out after a week to teach you the folly of toying with this place. What do you know about humans? Koga asks, after Morg Arkoon finishes. New type of Tret from what I understand. Aggressive, militaristic, strange pheromones and always on mating season with a stupid high toxin resistance. Morg Arkan says, and Koga shakes his head. What did I miss? We're from cruel space, Koga says, and Morg Arkan scoffs. No, you're not. Life requires Axiom to exist. It's in the plants, it's in the animals, and it's in the tiny harmless mushroom spores floating between us. It's everywhere and in all things, Morg Arkan says. Technically, it is in cruel space too. Null just can't be used, Koga replies. I know what's in cruel space. I know what null is, Morg Arkan says and considers before grinning. But if you want to prove it, we can. Right now, even. Really? How? Koga asks. I can strip the Axiom from you. It's a good way to knock someone completely off balance for a moment, Morg Arkan says, and Koga's mind races at the implications of that. Does it sever a sorcerer's connection to the wood? Koga asks, feeling defensive. Technically, but the wood will remember you and re-establish contact immediately, Morg Arkan says before stepping around Koga and giving him an odd look. You say humans are from cruel space. I say nonsense. Nothing lives there. But if you are from there, then ripping out your Axiom wouldn't hurt you, would it? It wouldn't. Rip away, Koga says, crossing his arms and closing his eyes. Ready when you are. There's an immediate tearing sensation, and Koga is suddenly aware of all sorts of minor wear and tear on him. He had been feeling perfectly fine, and now he can feel some dull aches in his feet and in the back of his mind. He's tired, but far from spent. You didn't even flinch, Morg Arkoon says in awe. Koga opens his eyes and looks at him in time to feel what Axiom had returned to him be torn out all over again. The local environment starts pouring the power back in, like a sudden vacuum in water or air. It is empty for a moment, but just a moment. How? You should have at least lost balance. Humans are a parallel evolution to Trets, big apes growing wiser and using tools more and more until certain environmental changes cause further change. But for us, it happened in cruel space. We have hints of Stone Age humans going back hundreds of thousands of years, with more animalistic humans going back millions. We're an old race, but it was only in the last few years we've been able to leave our world. That is the price of growing without Axiom. We should have been one of the first races on the galactic scene, but due to a wretched location, we're one of the last, if not the last. And without Axiom, no rejuvenating comas, no advanced computers or travel. Everything has to be done with much cruder machines I can scarcely imagine or by hand. Food is an issue, water purification,
Life in general is much harder without Axiom, Morgarkun mutters to himself, too. My grandfather has likely died since my last message home. He is a very old and withered man by human standards. He's less than half your age, Morg Arkin. To you, he is chronologically a child. But he's seeing not only the end of his own life approach, but his way of life is all but extinct back home. He has seen his home country laid to complete and utter ruin and forced to rebuild itself from the ashes. He was the one who spoke to me when I would return home beaten and weeping from the gentle care of my peers. He gave me focus, he gave me purpose, and he gave me comfort and direction. I've likely lost him forever and couldn't be there on his deathbed, so I honor him by remaking that old way of life. Koga gestures to the village around them. A rebirth of the Koga ninja clan. To be a sorcerer is to avenge yourself. To be a shinobi, a ninja, it is to survive. I understand. Also, you went a fair way off track in that conversation, Morg Arkin says, and Koga shrugs. I apologize, but I did get the point across, did I not? Just because you have not personally seen the trials another has been through does not mean they haven't been through them. Yes, I suppose that's true. You're a very strange people, hard to figure out. You haven't been asking questions, or rather, you haven't been asking US questions, just assuming, Koga says. People lie. Morg Arkin says, and Koga rolls his eyes. And if you trust no one and nothing, what do you have? Koga asks. The woods. Morg Arkin answers, and Koga snorts in amusement. I suppose you do, but the woods trust me. Why didn't you? Koga asks, even as he listens a little more to the woods than before to make up for its momentary absence. It's amazing how used to it he's grown. Because you're not one of us. How so? I've come from a time of great trial to dwell within the woods and grow stronger there. The wood accepts us. What more is needed? Koga asks. And Morg Arkin says nothing. Koga then smiles sadly. Perhaps if I had horns and a tail? Morg Arkin looks startled, then considerate. After a bit he shrugs and sighs. Apparently so. How about we get back to Kalstarn and see how he's doing? Koga offers, and Morg Arkin nods before giving a little huff of amusement. You know, most races pass out without Axiom. Their brains run off it, Morg Arkin says, and Koga nods. It's why the Undaunted were considering null grenades as a non-lethal takedown method until we learned about the Gravia. Koga answers. Why not? It's used all over the place by law enforcement, Morg Arkin asks. We don't like collateral damage. It's a waste of resources and makes us look incompetent. Koga answers. It's a backup option, though. It takes only a few steps to get back to the house where they're storing the information to find that Cal's Tarn hasn't moved so much as an inch. He's done listening to the recording, but he's slowly reading through the small book on the going-on and expenditures of a neighboring military duchy, one that had both enough power to and the financial capacity to absorb the loss of the forces destroyed in the attack. Churn Duchy. It produces a fair number of the components for full-on military vehicles, and right there has both the means and motivations to attack Nodok. The resulting shift in power could spiral into a war, and then the product becomes more valuable. Couple that with the potential for a sorcerer to show up and create a sudden succession crisis, and there was even more room for potential war profiteering. It was something that was stressed often in the notes. The idea that some people might find sorcerers predictable and try to take advantage of them, such as deliberately provoking them one way or another to get what they want out of them. So, you think you got them? Is Duchess Therachurn the one? Koga asks, and Kalstarn looks up at him in confusion. I don't know. She did something, but, Koga asks. If it was her, it wasn't alone. She has a lot of money coming in if a small war starts. But it's not that much more than she gets regularly. She gets just as much every 4 or 5 years, I think. 6, actually, but you're on the right track, Koga says, and Morg Arkin nods. The Churn Duchy has a strong history of martial excellence, but a deep aversion to using dishonorable tactics. Of course, that's in spite of the fact that fighting unfairly is something they call dishonorable, but bringing in overwhelming force isn't something they... Morg Archon takes a breath and calms down. Is there some history there? A small army of them got the idea that the proper way to woo a sorcerer is to defeat them in battle, so they tried to get the drop on me with modern military hardware. How'd you win? Kalstarn asks excitedly, looking up from his papers with stars in his eyes. By not fighting. I ran away. It was a pointless fight I didn't need to have, and they were stupid enough to chase me to a dark forest copse. There's no beating a sorcerer that way. Morg Arkin replies, and both Koga and Kalstarn are looking at him oddly. I was in the middle of a city. Straight-up fighting would just have gotten a lot of people hurt, their homes destroyed, and maybe even lives lost. There's no recorded case of one sorcerer making another sorcerer, but I didn't want to be a trendsetter in that direction. Good man, Koga says with a nod.